Have you ever wondered which global entity provides people with the most food, materials, or job opportunities? Well, few people realize that it is nature itself. Thanks to nature and its ecosystems, we can breathe fresh air, drink crystal clear water, or just relax and rest in nature's arms. Nature does not demand anything for these services. It provides them to us, humans, completely free of charge. However, humans tend to exploit nature to the maximum, demanding too much from our planet too quickly. When nature suffers, so do we. Sometimes we forget this principle. The question remains, however, as to how long nature can continue to provide us with its services.
I really like nature. I like nature because it is a beautiful place where you can spend time, relax, be alone, have adventures, and so on. I also really like nature because it is important for us as humans so that we can actually survive and live our lives as we know them. So yes, nature is very important to me. Nature needs to be protected because it provides us with a whole range of services that we need to survive. We call them ecosystem services. They are the services that allow us to exist in the first place. For example, nature provides us with food and clean water, and they are also the services that improve our livelihoods, like recreation or spending our free time in nature.
In the past, nature was protected mainly for its inner value. However, it has become clear that this motivation is not always effective. This is why the concept of ecosystem services was created, which clearly shows the majority of society and politicians why we absolutely need nature.
I am researching the concept of ecosystem services at the Czech Academy of Sciences. It is a concept that we use to evaluate what kind of values nature has for us. We try to quantify or measure with other qualitative methods how important different ecosystem services are for us. Nature in the Czech Republic is not in the best condition. Most of our nature is either agricultural or forest land. We are currently experiencing a large decline in forests, and agricultural land is often not managed sustainably.
The reality is that biodiversity is disappearing, not just here but around the world, and precious ecosystems are being lost or degraded. As they disappear, so do the services they provide. Changes in ecosystems have a direct impact on our quality of life. We are increasingly aware of our dependence on nature, yet the value of nature is often invisible to politicians and decision makers. In order to meet our needs while preserving functioning ecosystems, we must first recognize all the benefits that nature provides for us. We live in a world where we are used to paying for services. Almost everything has a price tag, and what has no expressed value is often overlooked. Nature provides many benefits to humans that we often don't even realize. Material benefits include both plant and animal food, as well as various types of materials such as wood or wool. Humans have learned to extract many medicinal substances from nature and to produce energy from natural biomass. Landscapes and ecosystems have enormous potential to teach and inspire people through intangible benefits. They allow us to recreate, take care of our physical and mental health, and shape who we are. Thanks to the regulatory benefits of nature, habitats suitable for life are created, plants are pollinated, soils are formed and decontaminated, and organisms harmful to humans are regulated. Functioning ecosystems help us regulate the climate, and it is only thanks to them that we can breathe clean air. Last but not least, ecosystems regulate the quantity, outflow, and quality of water. At the same time, they help us to mitigate the effects of natural disasters such as floods or extreme droughts. Ecosystems also have the capacity to provide these benefits not only to us, but also to future generations.
It is important to recognize that ecosystem services are not only provided by wild nature, but also by greenery in cities. Important in the city is the regulation of air quality, the regulation of air temperature and humidity, which we appreciate especially in the summer and during heat waves. Green spaces in cities also provide us with opportunities for recreation and leisure.
Nature in the city offers people many benefits and opportunities. It depends on what kind of nature and what kind of environment it is. Parks primarily provide a place for resting and recreation. Larger areas such as natural parks give us many opportunities for sporting activities. And then protected areas and forests are certainly a place for learning about nature and self-education. Here we are in the Prokop Valley, which is both a European site of community importance and a nature reserve as well.
And do you take care of this location somehow?
Definitely. There is certainly a need for some management and maintenance of this area. It mainly consists of mowing the grassy areas, the steps, or the cuttings of some invading plants. And then there is grazing, which does both of these things at the same time.
And the people who go to the Prokop Valley, how do they use the benefits of nature here? And what does nature offer them?
Of course, there is a wide range. There are many opportunities for recreation and walking, and at the same time they can get to learn about nature. It is also an aesthetic impression and landscape feature.
If we want to receive something from nature, we sometimes have to put something into it as well. We are talking about measures supporting various types of ecosystem services. In this case, for example, this could mean grassing over old farmland or turning it into community gardens, planting trees and orchards, or maintaining rare flower meadows with grazing. Revitalizing waterways is also an important measure.
Here you can see that the riverbed was adjusted. We added meanders to the water flow and created water areas and pools, mainly for amphibians, dragonflies and other invertebrates. People use it for walks, they walk their dogs here, and at the same time it is an important flood prevention measure. In case of some major flows, the flood wave will slow down, and the consequences on the lower areas will not be so catastrophic.
All the measures we have seen here help the production of ecosystem services. These services are, for example, the regulation of temperature and humidity. And there are also services that are intangible, such as recreation, which allows us to spend quality time in nature and at the same time helps us from the stress we experience in the city. The concept of ecosystem services in the city can help by making all these intangible services visible. For example, when we talk about whether or not to build on an area, the concept of ecosystem services shows us what are all the benefits of nature that the environment provides and what we lose by building on a green area.
Functioning ecosystem services in the city can significantly improve people's quality of life, and in order to obtain as many of them as possible, it is necessary to take proper care of the urban environment. Nature provides us with many other benefits, such as materials. One of the most widely used materials is wood, which has been used by humans in all sorts of ways throughout history. Outside the city, we usually come across forests whose main purpose is the production of wood. However, it is important not to forget the other ecosystem services that these forests are able to provide.
What we see around us are so-called spruce monocultures. These are forests that we humans have planted when we wanted to achieve faster wood production. Spruce monocultures are susceptible to various environmental problems. Nowadays, they are vulnerable to drought as a result of climate change, and they often suffer from bark beetle infestation. One of the reasons why spruce monocultures have difficulties in coping with these problems is that they are oriented towards only one ecosystem service, the production of wood itself, and are therefore unable to provide other ecosystem services, such as regulatory ones.
Is it possible to harvest wood from the forest and support other ecosystem services at the same time?
We are now in the Klokochna forest, which is 400 hectares of forest managed in close-to-nature manner. In all those 32 years, no clearing was created here. We try to restore, develop and harvest the forest in cooperation with nature. We try to dictate less to nature and cooperate more with it. Perhaps the most important thing is to create an appropriate microclimate in the undergrowth. This means that we adjust the light conditions by selective logging. In the crowns of the trees, we loosen the upper layer to allow just the right amount of light to penetrate to the ground to support the natural processes of the tree we want to grow. Here, we see a newly grown future fir tree. This forest is much healthier, more valuable, and more resistant to climate change, with which we are now vehemently struggling. 20 years ago, we blocked a stream here, and with the help of nature, this kind of natural environment was created here.
This forest is an example of how ecosystem services are not always automatically provided by nature. They are often co-created by humans. Thanks to nature-oriented management, this forest is not only used for timber production, but also creates a suitable habitat for animals, helps regulate soil quality and the amount of water retained. At the same time, it provides us with a pleasant place for recreation and leisure.
The forest we have seen here shows that a healthy, sustainably managed forest provides a much wider portfolio of ecosystem services than a spruce monoculture. And we also see that a healthy forest is much more resilient to climate change and bark beetle infestation. It is important to support all types of ecosystem services because we need them all. And if we only focus on one service, which in this case is the production service, we lose a number of other important services. These are necessary not only for the forest to continue to function properly, but also for us to be able to spend quality time in a healthy environment.
Nature's productive services are absolutely essential for human beings. Without them, we would not have one of the basic necessities of life, food. Humans have learned to use nature in the form of agriculture to produce enough food for the whole society. As with forestry, there are many different ways of approaching food production.
Now we are in an agricultural field, and you can see that it is a really big field. When we farm on large fields, the only ecosystem service we get is food production. We forget about services like erosion control or water retention. In terms of climate change, when we experience a drought, it turns out that the soil, which has actually been depleted by the unsustainable way of farming, is not able to hold as much water. So when we have droughts, it tells us that the unsustainable way of farming is not worth it.
Agricultural land makes up more than half of the area of the Czech Republic. If we want it to provide us with benefits other than food production, we must start using more sustainable methods of farming.
We are located in Velké Hostoradky on the Probio Eco Farm. Farming on our farm and those of our neighbors who also practice ecological farming differs mainly in the structure of the cultivated crops. After the harvest of the main crop, a catch crop is grown so that the soil has a permanent cover and is supplied with nutrients. Right here in this field, you can see the clover growing through here. Immediately after it, we sow buckwheat, and thanks to this, we are able to achieve 100% soil coverage during the year. The vegetation prevents excessive water evaporation, so we are able to retain soil moisture as well. There are several non-production functions. Today we are talking about climate protection, and thanks to these methods of farming, we are able to limit soil cultivation so that the soil retains carbon rather than losing it. Another non-production function is the landscape function, because the landscape is pleasant to look at and people can walk here all year round. It is not a semi-desert like in other places of our country where farming on arable land prevails. We are also establishing nectariferous biobelts that serve as a food source for pollinators throughout the year and as a possible refuge for other wildlife.
Although insects can sometimes get on our nerves, they are invaluable to us. Imagine if we lost all pollinators and people would have to pollinate crops themselves. How much work and money would that cost? Insects provide all this for free. According to a recent study, global food production worth more than €200 billion each year depends on pollination. If we don't want to lose pollinators, we need to create suitable conditions for them to live in, for example, by using biobelts and intercrops.
The concept of ecosystem services allows farmers to identify what services they support through their farming. The measures we have seen here show us that agricultural land can be used not only to produce food, but also to maintain the regulatory and material functions of the landscape that we need as well. These measures maintain both soil quality and water retention in the landscape and create space for animals and other organisms that live here.
Thanks to the concept of ecosystem services, we are able to realize what nature provides us in its various forms and what measures, for example, in forestry or agriculture, we can use to support these benefits. However, in order to assess the importance of specific ecosystem services, it is necessary to evaluate them correctly.
Ecosystem services are evaluated in different ways. The first is biophysical evaluation, which visualizes how the landscape works and what ecosystem processes take place in it. In climate regulation, we measure how much carbon there is in nature, how much of it is in biomass, and how much of it is in the soil. To do this, we use various technical devices and probes. Another way of evaluating ecosystem services are socio-cultural evaluation methods, where we are interested in how and why the landscape is important to individual people, what their preferences are, and what values they associate with it. Because nature is often taken for granted and people don't always appreciate its value, we also use a third method of evaluation, the economic method, which puts a monetary value on nature's benefits. Nature's recreational services are important to us all, and we measure them by asking visitors what they had to sacrifice in terms of time and money to get to a particular place in nature. Another thing we can do with such data is to link them to the routes taken by individual visitors in the area. We can then get a map like this. This map shows us what the economic value of the recreational function looks like in monetary terms for that particular area.
Thanks to the economic evaluation of ecosystem services, which have so far been overlooked and whose value is implicitly considered to be zero, they can now be given the significance and importance they deserve. One example is this river floodplain in South Bohemia.
We are now at the river Lužnica. It is one of the few rivers that has retained its natural character over a relatively long stretch. When we talk about ecosystem services, there is certainly a very significant effect on flood mitigation. By draining the water into the floodplain, where there is a huge retention area, the progress of the flood wave is slowed down. And if we wanted to monetize this, we have several options. For example, the shadow project method. This means comparing the transformative effect of an artificial reservoir comparable to the flood and estimating the cost of building such a reservoir. Another method would be that we have a certain level of risk downstream. That is, we have a certain populated area. And if we know the transformative effect of that flood, then we can say that if the flood is mitigated, then the damage that it will do to us will be lower. We can then calculate the monetary value using an estimate of the damage and an estimate of the value of the properties and infrastructure.
After evaluating and summing up the most significant ecosystem services, the economic value of this river floodplain is more than €8 million per year.
Evaluating ecosystem services helps us when we are trying to decide what to do or not do in the landscape. For example, when we decide where to build, where to conserve nature, where to mine, it helps us to consider what nature provides us and what we lose if we disrupt nature in some way.
When assessing different scenarios for the development of an area, there are often situations in which some ecosystem services are reduced in favor of others. Ecosystem services evaluation allows us to identify these trade-offs and choose an alternative that will provide us with the widest portfolio of benefits. Just like in the case of this nearby sand pit.
We are located in the Detached sandpit natural monument. It is such an interesting area because it has its own unique story. Towards the end of the last millennium, it was discovered that the area had not been recultivated. It seemed that the technical recultivation originally proposed here would have to be additionally carried out. This would mean that the area would be filled with some kind of construction waste and completely replanted with pine trees. In other words, this unique site would disappear. At that point, we stepped in and tried to stop and remodel the original plan. The result was that we designed the whole area and very quickly declared it a natural monument. This area is interesting from a number of perspectives. Speaking of ecosystem services, I see it as a biodiversity hotspot because it is a wonderful haven for species of animals and plants that prefer dry, sunny and sandy habitats. For example, it is home to the largest population of the critically endangered natterjack toad. And I also see a strong portfolio of ecosystem services in terms of inspiration and the joy of seeing something beautiful in nature. These things enrich us as humans and make us want not only to go out into nature, but also to protect it. I think it is useful when evaluating a project that affects the nature and landscape of this region to make a simple spreadsheet and think about which ecosystem services are affected by the project. And I also think that they are useful in the framework of the evaluation or assessment of the impact on the environment, that they should not be missing there.
In this case, thanks to the recognition of the range of benefits, priority was given to the scenario of leaving this area to nature and biodiversity instead of a forest recultivation. However, the use of the concept of ecosystem services is still in its infancy and needs to be disseminated among key actors who would be able to apply it in practice.
A number of projects dealing with ecosystem services are currently underway in the Czech Republic. For example, the Ona Nature project, which introduces the concept of ecosystem services into the management of protected areas, especially those of European importance within the Natura 2000 system. It also assesses what are the values of nature currently received from protected areas. At the moment, an ecosystem services platform is being established, which will work at national level and will be a platform where experts can share their experiences and learn how to work with the concept of ecosystem services.
The evaluation of ecosystem services takes place not only at the local level, but also at the national and European levels. As part of the biodiversity strategy, the European Union also recommends better evaluating and integrating aspects of nature's values and services into public and business decision-making.
There is also a need for ecosystem services to be better integrated into policy making and the legislative environment so that the concept can be actively used, for example, in deciding how we develop the landscape.
Many of us are thinking that nature is not something that should serve people. The concept of ecosystem services does not try to sell nature, but on the contrary to make visible all the benefits that it has for humankind. This includes services that are not so apparent at first sight. The concept of ecosystem services changes the way we think about nature, and it is this new perspective that can help us build a more sustainable relationship between nature and humans.
The results of evaluating ecosystem services provide a very good basis for us to see with our own eyes that nature is not worthless to humans, but on the contrary, that we really depend on it.
For me, nature is a kind of unique entity that exists independently from us. We are more or less a part of it, but at the same time we feel that nature does not need us. We don't even know if it counts with us in the future.
For me, nature and all its production and non-production functions were actually the motivation why I started doing organic farming. I hope that by developing organic agriculture in the Czech Republic, we will be able to protect and improve all these production and non-production functions.
I try to give the forest all the good things I can. And I think that over the years, we don't owe each other anything. The forest has been very generous to me.
When planning the landscape, one must try to think as comprehensively as possible, and ecosystem services are one such attempt to think comprehensively about nature. It makes us think about what is really important, what we get from nature, how we should manage and plan the landscape.
Ecosystem services are actually something that is all around us. I think it's all about recognizing all the benefits that we get from nature in our everyday lives. This is something that can then help to bring the concept of ecosystem services and nature conservation into our everyday decisions, as well as political and social decision-making.
At the moment, the way we are using the benefits of nature is not sustainable for our planet. However, thanks to the concept of ecosystem services, we can better understand which ways of managing and using ecosystems are best for a healthy environment. Humans are also a part of nature, and if we want to prosper as a society, nature needs to prosper as well. We should not forget this basic principle. This film was created with the support of the LIFE programme of the European Union.